What is data? Data, it's a collection of information, as you can see here presented. And when we say collection of information gathered by observation, measurements, research, or analysis, I'll take these words one after the other. By observation. By observation could mean the regular data collection that we do during normal business operations. I will use a simple example that most people will relate with, which is a retail store, for instance. Every time we go to a retail store to buy uh, any item, household items, or whatever items as the case may be, we tend to give some information out, and in fact everything you have bought becomes a data that has been collected as per the actions you have done by visiting that center. Now, measurement could be probably someone taking an experiment. When we are doing experiments, different kind of experiments, we want to test out some customer behavior, we want to test out some lab experiments in researches, and then you know in different analysis that we do also, we are most likely going to generate data out of this. So all of this information that we gather, it becomes data that can be used to make different kind of decision. Now, why is data so important? Why is it so important? Why is everyone talking about data? Data is important. As you can see here, I have listed some very key things that we are all can relate with again. And considering this tutorial is for those who are just venturing into this field, so I am using examples that we all can relate with. Increase revenue, for instance. You want to increase your revenue. How can data help with increasing revenue? For us to use data to increase our revenue, you want to track, for instance, stock that you have in your retail store. In your retail store, if you stock foodstuffs like bread, rice, and other household items or whatever you sell, there is need for you to track these sales. Every time a customer comes to your store and you get to know that you don't have these goods in stock just because the customer wants to buy and you could not sell at that time, you are definitely losing revenue, right? You're losing revenue. But with data and proactive analysis and use of this data, you can be able to prompt your supply chain, hey, I am less on this order, kindly supply me. You can be able to track how many do you sell in a day, how many do you sell in a week, month, and then be able to plan accordingly. Hence, you will not lose revenue, and then, in other words, you will increase your revenue by making sure no customer comes to your store and go back with money because you don't know about that stock being off the shelf. We want to answer business questions. We use data to answer business questions because for any business to run at its optimal level, businesses always have questions to be answered. How many customers visited our store yesterday? Out of these customers, how many are male? How many are female? What is the age range of these customers? All of these help the business uh, managers, people who are in charge of running this business to understand what can we do to please our customers? These are business questions. From this data, we can be able to figure out some things out of the data we've collected to be able to figure out answers to these business questions. We can optimize our operational processes. Is it morning hours that we are having more customers or evening hours? Ideally, you would say maybe it's evening hours that probably when people are closing from office, that is when we need to probably have more hands or more staff to attend to these customers. you know if you look at the data, you'll be able to know which specific hours are actually the peak hour that you can run the business, hence giving you the flexibility to even do your planning around your staff and all of these uh, uh, people that you need to make your operations in this retail store to be at its optimal level. You will be able to control costs. You know loopholes. You can actually analyze even the data of, let's say, the power supply in your retail store. You could say which of the equipment do we have running most of the time. You could say which of the fridge do we have running that are not supposed to be running, because we can actually probably switch them off at some time. So many things that we can use to control cost. We can use data to analyze all these processes. Hence, we'll be able to cut costs. Do we need more staff? Do we need to reduce the number of staff? Do we need to run a certain kind of errands together instead of doing deliveries in just a random way? Can we use the data collected for deliveries to cluster the delivery and map routes so that we can reduce cost on the way our delivery uh, riders could take the goods or the orders to the customers. Hence, this will lead to service efficiency. I talked about the route mapping. When you collect the orders, you can use data to actually map out the efficiency of the service delivery, both at the level of the retail store itself, even up to delivery. You could actually see which of your delivery team are not doing exactly what is expected of them. We can use data to analyze where you don't show bias, but you use the data to actually let this team member understand that you are not targeting them, but the data. You're using what the data says. And with this, we have so many other importance of using data to improve any business operation. But I mean, these are just the ones I know. They are quick for you to understand as a beginner, and as you learn anything on in the data space, have at the back of your mind that all you are needed to do as a data analyst is to ensure that you can use data to help make decisions that are at least around these listed uh, options that we have here. So in our next uh, tab, we'll be talking about how do we even store data? Where do we store the data? Then we'll talk about how we can use SQL to pull data out of that storage called database. See you in the next slide. So what is a database? I mentioned earlier that in our retail store, for every visit that a customer makes or activities that we capture digitally or even manually, you know, we are storing data, whether we write it on paper or we type it in on a computer. We are actually storing data. So when we store data on top of that component, either manually on a paper or digitally on a computer, we store that data in what we identify as a database. That is why this definition here states that a database stores data. It could be electronically, digitally, or manually, just like our normal exercise book or normal files, So anything that stores data has become a database, okay? And just for a quick example again, let's take a good example of our phone. When you want to get a contact from someone, you want to get someone's contact, you ask for their phone number, right? So when you collect that phone number or from that person and you store it on your phone, you are actually storing data in a database. Okay, so one way or the other, you are relating with a database on daily basis, right? So now, when you store this data, there is need for us to retrieve that data back. I'll refer you back to the example of collecting a phone number from a friend you just met or someone you lost their contact, and then you happen to cross path again and you ask them for their phone number. When you store this number, any day you want to give them a call or anytime you're trying to call someone from your phone, you are actually querying that database that you stored the data. Hence, when you start typing the name of the person, the database now gives you back the return, right? That should ring a bell. Now, what is SQL? SQL is a structured query language. It is a language, right? Structured query language, meaning it has a format, it has a template, right, that the data has been stored, right? So anytime we store data into a database, there is need for us to retrieve that data. Hence, we use SQL to retrieve that data out of the database. Okay, so we write some kind of script, some people call it program, whatever it is, we write it, we use it to communicate to the database so that we can be able to extract data or insert data or update data. I'll go back again to the example of our phone, where you want to get a phone number from a friend. When you add all those information, you click save. At that time, you are inserting data into that database. When you are searching for that phone at a later time, you are extracting data out of the database. When you want to edit, probably you want to change the name or you want to add email address, you are updating that data in the database. So all of these actions that you're doing on your phone, now we are going to be using a program. At a later time, we'll be using the SQL Server and the SQL Server Management Studio to run different programs that will do exactly each of these actions. And maybe I should add that when we want to use SQL as a data professional, it is of different levels for different roles. Hence, as a data analyst, there are some kind of queries you may not need to write as a data analyst. I mean, All you might need to do is just to extract the data out of the database, which most of the time this will be the case for a data analyst. And for other people who will be progressing into data engineering, business intelligence developer, you might need to now write other queries that will update or insert into a database. All of these, as we progress in this journey, I will guide you on what is important for you in your certain role, and then we will be able to distinctively separate these type of queries. But for now, my focus is for you to understand as a beginner the type of queries that we are writing as a data analyst. So we'll be stopping here for today, and then we will continue in the next slide. Thank you. The essence of having SQL for a data analyst is not far-fetched. Like I mentioned earlier, SQL helps us to retrieve data from the database. The business always have question to ask of their data. I gave different examples the last time. How many customers did we have yesterday? How many products are we running out of? What type of customers do we have in the last 6 months? Male, female. What are the age range of our customers? What do you think we are supposed to do to make more customers who bought this type of product to buy this other type of product? What strategies should we take for the customers who bought bread but didn't buy egg? What can we do to entice them to buy egg? Many of our customers bought bread, egg, and ingredients to make tea. These are questions that the business would always show interest in. Hence, who do they turn to? They turn to us as data analysts to give them answers to these questions. That is the reason why we as data analysts, we use SQL to query the database and then return result to present to these business users. Again, in many organizations, they have distinctively separated roles. I mean, in some organizations, a data analyst will probably not need to write SQL for them to perform their job. That is true. It's rare. However, when you're doing your interview, more than 90% of the time, you will have to prove that you know how to use SQL for you to get a job. So, I mean, it's worth it to put in the effort to learn SQL. You know the good news? SQL is cheap and easy to learn. I'll be taking you through the below beginner step of learning SQL. Follow me. Let's go. Now, how should you learn SQL? According to my experience, and maybe I should tell you this, I started my career not having any idea about what SQL is. Of course, I know some Excel. I could work with some Excel rows and columns, but I don't have any idea of what a database is. Now, I can tell you, after learning SQL, I decided that it is appropriate to break the stages into these 4 stages. 1, you want to learn the syntax. What exactly is a syntax when we talk about a programming language or even for SQL query language? A syntax is like laid down rules. It's just like the way when you're learning how to drive, you have been given a rule. When you see the stop sign, you have to obey it. Everyone that has been taught how to drive will follow this rule. When anyone breaches this rule, it creates a kind of problem. So the same thing applies here. Learning SQL requires you to follow some basic rules. You can't change that. The select will definitely have to come before the from. You don't have to use some kind of commas in a certain kind of place. All of these rules, you have to try as much as possible to have them at your fingertips. With this kind of information at your fingertips, you know when you're breaching the rule. You'll be able to quickly retrace your step and ask yourself some simple questions to correct yourself, to check if you're still following the rules that has been laid down or you are out of it. Knowing these rules will reduce your frustration. It will reduce the time it will take you to, struggle to figure out what exactly is going on. So when learning the syntax is out of the way, now you want to know these different functions. If you already know how to work with functions in Excel, congratulations. The same way the functions are applied in Excel, you can use some of those experience here also in SQL. Now you want to learn the functions. For instance, when I say using the function sum in SQL, of course, it is an aggregate function, for instance, and you would need to know when I'm using an aggregate function, what other keywords do I need to use together with this aggregate function. Now that is what I mean by learning the workings of the functions. When you know this, now you try. Now the next stage is for you to try to practice using this function in use cases. You use them in different use cases. For instance, an example: give me the highest number of products sold yesterday. So for instance, give me the product with the highest sales yesterday. The products with the highest sales yesterday. That is a use case. I've given you two kind of conditions there: highest sales yesterday, and it is a product. With this kind of use cases, you can now start practicing. You can even set questions for yourself. You can see any kind of raw data and try to build a business question out of it. Many people who are beginners get stranded by asking, where will I get the questions from? Where is the question supposed to come from? How will I be able to practice on my own? Again, we have many places where you can learn SQL, both online, offline. I've done a video on setting up with a proper retail store database that you can use to do your own practice. And here are some of the links that you can use to get your practice going. I highly recommend W3 schools. If you have some kind of concept that you're learning and then you're a bit stuck, you can actually refer to W3 schools and you will get a good definition of these functions. If you want to practice on daily basis, I recommend you bookmark sqlzoo.net. You'll be able to practice up to any kind of level you want. It could be the basic level, it could be the intermediate level, and it could be the advanced level. And if you check in the description, you will get the link for these practice questions. In our next video, we'll be talking about SQL for absolute beginners. And I intentionally add the word absolute beginners because I will be using examples that you can relatively connect with. I will be using examples that it is easy for anyone, whether you've ever done anything tech before or you've never done anything tech before, you're just a data enthusiast. It will be easy for you to actually get into the flow of understanding what SQL is. I hope with this video I've been able to talk to you about how SQL and data can actually contribute to the growth of any business. Thank you so much, and remember to subscribe and keep supporting. Like this video if it has really given you a good idea. Thank you.